Good evening and welcome, everyone. We will wait a minute before we get started. Our live stream has begun. This meeting is going to be recorded and simultaneously live streamed on the Monitor's YouTube channel. We'll begin in 1 minute.
Asha, I have 6 o'clock if you want to get started, or if you want to wait another minute or so.
Hey, good evening and welcome. It's 6 p.m. and number.
Oh, shoot. What happened to?
She disappeared.
She's coming back.
Hit the wrong button when I saw the recording in progress flash on my screen. So it looks like we have a critical mass to go ahead and get started at 6 p.m. And we want to be sensitive to everyone's time this evening. We are scheduled to go for 90 minutes and we will begin promptly. So welcome. This is, I believe, our 24th CAC meeting, and we seriously appreciate everyone's continued contributions and leadership on these important issues. Edna likes to call this almost like our think tank, where we can just reach across to various agencies and just put our thinking caps on and work together to hopefully come up with avenues for solutions for some of NYCHA's problems that face residents. And so all of the things that we tend to focus on are things that we've heard when we're talking to residents about the things that are most important to them. So with that, we will begin. I will go over the agenda for this evening, although we might not stick exactly to agenda because I know that we have different members who may be popping in and out due to other conflicting meetings this evening. But we will start with a monitor update from our Deputy Monitor, Dan Brunell, and then we'll hear updates from our NYCHA representatives, Marnoosh Turbatnejad, Leroy Williams, and Samantha Rogers. And then we will hear from Community Partnership Director for Brownsville Partnership, Noelle Myers-Powell. And then if she's able to join us, we will get a brief update from Council Member Alexa Avias from District 38 in Brooklyn, who's also the New York City Council Chair for Public Housing Committee. And then we'll hear from all of our other members who may have updates or want to weigh in on the discussion. So with that, I ask for everyone to just feel free to jump in, even during presentations, just so that we can have a robust discussion as we go. Although it's not listed out by agenda items, I am hoping to also hear from the members of our Safety and Security Subcommittee and or their designees this evening to update on some of the work from that committee. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Asha. Good evening, everybody. Dan Brunell, Deputy Monitor. So the heating season at NYCHA, as it did for every building in the city, started on October 1st. for about almost the first week, temperatures were warm enough so that I probably know heat was being provided. That changed rather abruptly about 10 days ago. So heat has been provided. The thing that I want to talk about is, as we have reported in several prior monitor reports, the preparation for the heating season, which really starts in late February and March when temperatures start to warm in the latter part of the winter, and then goes through the entire summer through September. And that period is just as important in terms of the heating season being successful, meaning that NYCHA is able to provide proper heating, as any other time in the year. Boilers are turned off. Generally, the only thing in the summer that NYCHA is providing is hot water, which you don't need nearly as much firepower, so to speak, from boilers as you do when you have to provide actual heat to the building. When the boilers are off and they can be drained of water, then they can be cleaned or overhauled, and other repairs and things can be made. NYCHA has over 1,100 boilers, and boilers aren't the only equipment. There's lots of other equipment involved as well that needs to be cleaned and lubricated and repaired. And the monitor team, NYCHA's internal heat unit from the Environmental Health and Safety, and work together with NYCHA's heating services department, which of course are the staff that does all the work in terms of the repairs. And then NYCHA has brought on some contractors to help do some of the work, which really allows NYCHA's heat department staff to do even more preventive maintenance on other equipment. And we're hoping to get a report out in a couple of weeks. We're finalizing it now. And the thing I can tell you is that NYCHA is more prepared for this heating season than they have been since the start of the monitorship. Now, that doesn't mean that guarantees there won't be outages. There will be outages. In fact, there have already been, I think, 6 or 7. Luckily, they haven't been very long outages, so people may not even have noticed them because the temperatures were probably in the 50s when the outages happened. NYCHA's equipment's old, even when it's maintained. Old equipment, of course, is more likely to have breakdowns than newer equipment. And then another thing that we've been talking about for a number of years is heating systems require, there's two parts, and both of them have to work properly. Otherwise, heat does not get to the units. The first part, the part that most people think about, are the boilers, the equipment that actually produces the heat. But the boilers are in the basement. They're not in each unit. So in order for apartments at NYCHA to get proper heat, the distribution system, and there's pipes, of course, in the walls, and then there's other equipment that helps create the suction to pull the steam or the water, depending on the kind of heating system it is, from the basements up into the units and then back down to the boilers to be reheated. And all of that has to work, otherwise there's a breakdown in the system. It's extensive. So the heating department, again, working with the monitor team and then with environmental health and safety, had even did a better job this summer executing their plan. Just about all the boilers were overhauled. I think there's still a few left, and there's some required welding that needs to be done, which can be difficult to get welders, particularly in late September and early October at the start of the heating season. But not every boiler is required in a boiler room at NYCHA in order to provide proper heat, particularly early in the season when temperatures aren't extremely cold. So we're still working with NYCHA to get any last minute repairs done. We have a meeting every Wednesday, tomorrow morning at 8:30. We have another meeting with the heat department, with the chief operating officer and some people from her team, to get updates in terms of where they are in finishing up these last bits. And of course, we're now working, since the heat is on, investigating the outages and working to improve on the improvements that were made last heating season. So that's where things are. From the perspective, I know this isn't a resident meeting, but a CAC meeting. But for resident leaders, I think, as you well know, because for one thing, many of you have been in NYCHA for years, a very long time, is people need to make sure that windows to the extent they can, are working, not to leave them open, particularly in very cold weather, because the drafts, of course, will pretty much negate any heat in the units. And if you're having, you think you're not getting heat, you should definitely call it in, because obviously, as you know, as with anything at NYCHA, nobody's going to show up if you don't call in the complaint, because they won't know about it. So we'll be working together with the heat department, and hopefully we'll have a even better heating season than we had last year.
Thank you, Dan, for those updates, and it's timely considering heat season just started this month. You started to touch on it, but I'm wondering if you could say just a little bit more about what your statement that you thought that they were more prepared this year than the past years of the monitorship. Presumably every summer, hopefully they're getting ready for heat season. What did they do this year that was perhaps more extensive, or showed you that they would be more ready, hopefully, for this year?
Well, this has really been a plan to kind of reinvigorate the heat department that started early in 2022. So really a little over a year and a half ago. So for one thing, the heat department was able to bring on new staff, both line heat plant technicians, or HPTs, and also managers, which they had about 50% as many managers as they needed. And of course, managers are important to organize and make sure that the staff are working effectively. The other thing they did is they really invigorated their training. We have some of the monitor team from Quadel have in particular been working very closely with HMSD and with other units within NYCHA to help them make their training stronger and more comprehensive. And so that's been going on. NYCHA, by the way, is going to open a heat lab hopefully next summer in their big facility in Long Island City, where they'll have actual pieces of different kinds of heat equipment that they have at development, so that staff will be able to learn hands-on the equipment, how to do various kinds of maintenance and repair work. And the plan was just better organized and than it was last summer. And last summer, they did a pretty good job. So just better communication, more work got done, putting better information into work orders so people understood what their needed repairs were, so that they could be prioritized and repairs could be made. There are still repairs that need to happen. NYCHA does not have enough funding to make all the heat repairs that are needed, which is an issue. So it's those kinds of things, Ash. And like everything, this is an ongoing process. It isn't that they've gotten there; they haven't gotten there. This is a high mountain that's being climbed here, and NYCHA will be on that mountain for a while. But the good news is that they're heading in the right direction.
Thank you for that update, Dan, and that is good news. I see Leroy Williams with your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to add that I employ that when residents are having these outages, that residents call in those and get ticket numbers, right? Because the work is driven towards the tickets. So if it's one ticket in, they're not going to think it's that big of an emergency, or if it's just an isolated an emergency. But if they see several, 5, 6, 10, they know to put the emergency for that particular development. Most times the heat does go out at night, of course, because in the evening is when most people are home. So ESD is monitoring those work tickets. So I wanted to make sure that, and especially since I see some of the COP chairs and other resident leaders on, to make sure that residents call the 718-707-7771 number and get that work ticket. Also, there is a line just for resident leaders, so that they can also call in work tickets and prioritize the work that is needed in their development, not only for heat, for other things. And that number is 718-707-5300. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And while we have you on the spot, if you could formally introduce yourself, because we haven't, I think, had you recently as on a CAC call. So for those who haven't formally met you, please introduce yourself.
Oh, good evening. My name is Leroy Williams. I'm the Vice President of Resident Services for the New York City Housing Authority. I've been working for the Housing Authority for about 25 years. Born and raised in NYCHA, Melrose Houses in public housing, and Baychester Houses in Section 8. So it's a pleasure, everyone.
Thank you. And thank you for your important work and leadership. And we will get to you more formally a little bit later in the agenda. Ms. Lozano, I see you have a hand up.
Leroy, I'm glad that you mentioned the 5,300 number, but sometimes it's a little frustrating because sometimes in some developments, I hear that they rely on the resident leader to make the call because they seem to think we have all these special numbers. But sometimes the 5,300 number, when you do call them, if it's supposed to be a TA line, they seem to constantly be asking to be reassured if that's the individual that's calling that number. And I think that I just want, now that you mentioned it, to bring it to your attention that maybe we need to reform the structure of how they take the calls, or if they can potentially have a listing of who those resident leaders are around the city, because it gets a little frustrating. Sometimes they act as though you're just a resident. Are you sure you're the it's the questions they ask. And I just think that it's just something, as an FYI to think about, because it's been mentioned to me by other resident leaders that it's a little extra per se.
So
I just
I
want
can,
to put it out there, that's all.
yeah, no, thank you for that, Ms. Lozano. So I would say that we do send a updated listing of the resident associations, not only to ESD, to all departments, so that everyone knows who is the current resident association presidents. I think that the line of questioning is happening. I know at least 2 instances where either presidents or another board member gave the line just for resident leaders to the general population of residents, and they were calling the line even though they weren't an actual board member. So we instituted that to make sure to say that, are you this person? You're not giving the phone number out to just anyone. But I will relay this information to ESD to make sure that, again, they have the most updated listing, and to make sure whoever is manning that line has that listing. It's not enough just for them to have the listing, but to make sure that the person working that particular shift has the updated listing.
Great, thank you for bringing that point up, because this is a perfect example of kind of things that just come up as a CAC, and if we could, just troubleshoot and come up with solutions right there on the spot, that's great. So it sounds like, Leroy, you're able to make sure that that training piece and that list is handy, so that hopefully resident leaders, calling on behalf of their residents aren't faced with increased frustration. So thank you for that solution on the spot. Appreciate that. Okay, so with that, we will keep moving on in our agenda, and we actually are going to focus on our NYCHA representatives with updates. We'll start with you, Marnoush.
Thank you, Asha. Good evening, everyone. So there are a few things I wanted to mention, a few updates. I wanted to start with the capital tracker, which we've been talking about in previous meetings. So the last meeting I shared some updates as to feedback that was collected through the different working groups that would be integrated into the new capital tracker. And now next week, I believe it will be moving forward. The capital reps will be doing a demonstration, a presentation of the enhanced tracker with the monitors team, with HUD and a few other stakeholders. And thereafter, they will begin to schedule the public demos, and we'll have webinars and answer questions on how to use the site geared towards the launch, which will probably take place in the weeks after next. So probably before December, before the next CAC meeting. So if this group is interested, I'm happy to forward that information either to you, Asha, or to the larger group. And if you're unable to attend those webinars, the Capital team is also open to doing a demo during this meeting in December if it's not too late by then, so that there will be an opportunity to learn how to navigate the site in December as well, if you're not able to make the other demos.
Yeah, I would really like that if we could have at least an abbreviated demo on some future CAC meeting. That would be valuable. We're really, the concept was kind of born here in this group, so we're really happy to see it coming to fruition, and that it's getting rolled out to residents, and that they're having input on the process as it keeps developing. Edna, I know you've been working very hard on this initiative as well. Did you want to weigh in a little bit?
No, I think it's just a wonderful testament to the ability to take something from concept to reality and to get as much feedback as possible. We know there's still some areas that we want to see included, and we're hoping that that will be part of the second rollout. But we want to first, let's get this rollout out and then improve as we go along. So congratulations, NYCHA, on this.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I mean, for me personally, through my own work, I always kind of have like 10 different questions about a different capital project, and to be able to go to one portal to have those questions answered, it's helpful for me. So hopefully it'll be helpful for everybody else as well.
That's great.
Sorry, I think there's another question.
Mr. Hall, did you have another question?
Yes. First of all, I really want to thank both of you, Asha and Edna Hanley, for really promoting this tracker. All right, it's very, very important. And I'd like Mr. Banajad to understand I can't wait to try this out in its entirety. It means a lot. And if you can recall our last meeting, which was taking place in Bronx River Houses in the Bronx, the TA president mentioned, how long does it take for a capital project to go full cycle? And the best answer I could give it was 18 months. But you have the breakdown of the different units that one goes through. So it is vitally important that they no longer have to stay on the phone and call their coordinator to keep up with that. This tracker would be the answer. So I really hope that this thing takes its place and sets off, and also that all the presidents are informed of this, because it's very important, and this is a viable instrument to the success of many and all housing developments. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. And yeah, in my discussions with the Capital team, they've expressed interest in doing demos for, any group who's interested, smaller groups who are interested in a more one-to-one type of demonstration. They've also expressed interest in coordinating. So I'll make sure that information is shared with this group, because like I said, it'll probably happen in the next few weeks and prior to the next CAC meeting.
Okay, good.
That's great. Yeah, that kind of information, like you said, one-stop shopping for residents and resident leaders, just to be able to see what's going on in the development, how far along the project is, who's responsible for it. All of that information is critical and goes a long way for transparency. Excellent. Any other updates?
The other thing I want to quickly mention was NYCHA's process for providing stair climber services for residents with disabilities, for vulnerable residents during the course of the elevator modernization project, since there are service disruptions. So there are two things I wanted to highlight. First, if the building is a one-car elevator, vulnerable residents will have the option to relocate. If they decline, then they have the option, like residents of other buildings that are not single car elevators, to put in a request for the assistance of stair climbers. So the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because one, at least 2 months prior to the start of the project, the property managers reach out to the resident leaders, notify residents, and email surveys to residents to help identify vulnerable residents who might need the reasonable accommodation when the time comes. So it would be helpful for residents to fill out those surveys. There will also be, I think, flyers and posters posted throughout the building. And then I think there will also be door knocking if they haven't heard from certain residents. So it would be helpful to have a complete list, and that way it'll be easier to make arrangements. So important to get that survey done. And a second
before you move on, I think Leroy wanted to weigh in on that. Leroy, please.
Yeah, so just wanted to make sure that my team is involved in the elevator modernization. So I know Queensbridge, I think that's Miss Williams Moore area. They have particular buildings that are going under modernization now. And so far we've on door knocking to complete those surveys 6 times. We're going to be doing 2 more outreach later on this week and next week. For a total of 8. Hopefully we can get to as many residents as possible. We, trying to make sure that ahead of time, as she stated, that we know who needs what kind of help. And it's not only stair climbers, right? It might be other type of assistance that's needed. So anytime that we do this modernization, resident participation, civic engagement will be involved in door knocking and emailing, making sure that we're keeping up with the resident association needs throughout the process. So I just wanted to weigh in that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I see Ms. Williams Moore and Mr. Hall have their hands up. Tamika, please.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Manoush. Thank you for that. I have 2 questions. Is NYCHA staff trained in order to operate the stair climber? Also, that's my question. Is NYCHA staff, yeah.
Yeah, so it's NYCHA staff volunteers who will be operating the stair climbers, and they receive training through their property management, which is why it's important to put in the request for that service in advance, because they are relying on the services of volunteers. And I believe it takes 2 volunteers to operate the climbers. And they can take, I think, maybe 30 minutes or more to transport through the stairs. So it is an onerous process. But the second point that I wanted to make was that we asked that residents put in the request at least 24 hours before use. Because if they put in the request to schedule them the same day, it would just take longer, especially because it does involve coordinating with the volunteers.
And Mr. Hall?
And I want Mr. Williams to hear this. My major concern is a housing development that is either in PACT or RAD. And going through this transition, they're in dire need of a stair climber. Now, the surveys are good, but a lot of residents are still trying to feel out whether they are in PACT or RAD or why they're in PACT or RAD. So And I'm going to use one example, Linden Houses in Brooklyn. I had the misfortune, I guess you could say, of meeting the TA president, who is an elderly senior citizen, and she's going through this transition. And it was my understanding that for whatever reason whatsoever, they could not utilize this stair climber. And I could not understand that. But I'm hoping Mr. Williams could personally look into this because, you know, this is what I call the black hole, because this development is now in the PAC program. And, you know, there's nothing being done in their best interest as far as this particular type of assistance is concerned. So, Mr. Williams, I hope you can heed this.
Yes, I hear you with that. I'll definitely follow up with the stair climber, but to be clear, me and my team speak to the TA president often. You know, I've been to many meetings at Linden, and we continue to meet with the president and their board often. For the stair climbers, right, I would definitely take that back to the PAC partner, but because they're all tall buildings, they don't take out all elevators at the same time, right? So there's always an elevator working at the development. Yes, it might take a little bit longer because if it's only two and they're doing a new one for one of them, it might take longer, but there's always an elevator available at that particular site. When you have smaller developments where there may be only 6 or 7 floors and you only have one elevator, that's a different type of thing that we have to handle, and we handle that accordingly. So I will make sure that Ms. Van Heusen, who is the director of what we call resident outreach for modernization and comprehensive services, reach out to the TA and the partner to find out what was the lacking there, because there should always be an elevator at work, especially with buildings with 2 or more elevators.
Okay, thank you for that transparency. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, and thank you for making that distinction too. Mr. Martinez.
Yes, good evening. How's everyone doing? I have a quick question about the volunteers for the Stairmaster. What do you mean volunteers? Where do they come from?
Stair climber.
That's what I said, the stair climber.
You said Stairmaster.
I said Stairmaster? I'm sorry. Stair climber. Thank you so much, Mr. Williams. Who are the volunteers?
They're NYCHA staff members.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're
So-
not vendors.
So, but what does it mean, like when you say volunteer? Because if they're NYCHA staff, how are they volunteering?
The property management has reached out to staff and has informed them about this need, and people who are interested in volunteering sign up for it.
But they're actually paid staff. They're being paid.
Yes. Mhm.
Correct. But they wouldn't be receiving overtime, for example, or additional compensation for operating the Stairmasters. The stair climbers.
That's what I said. Everybody's saying stair.
Stair climbers.
And it could be after hours.
So
Well,
when
if it's after hours, of course they get overtime. But I
If
wanted
it-
to elaborate on that. So a regular course of a caretaker job is not to use a stair climber, clearly, right? It's to clean and to do the operational of the development. So when you have these instances where we're doing elevator modernization or elevators are going out for whatever particular reason, we have to ask staff, will they volunteer? So just say I don't know, Marsing Air Rex, right? The elevators go out at that particular, or we're planning an outage at that particular development. We can't mandate staff to do so. We ask staff to volunteer, and if needed, we will again go outside the development and ask other staff, will they volunteer for any particular thing? And that's why it's important that residents call at least 24 hours before to plan this so that we know exactly what's needed for the upcoming day. So, we call it volunteer, right? In the sense that this is not part of their regular role, but they are paid NYCHA staff that will operate the stair climber, and they get full training on how to use that particular stair climber.
I
And so-
just wanted to add, if it's after hours, after 7 PM, it's actually the members of the
ESD.
emergency management and emergency management department that does the
SD.
operation.
So, all right, so you're gonna have actual paid staff doing this work, but it has to be 24 hours. They have to have notice 24 hours prior to the elevator going out.
Well, again, if it's planned, right? If we know that the elevator is going down and stuff, we ask for the 24-hour before. If it's like an emergency, right? If it just goes out and we don't know, of course, they may not be able to call 24 hours before. We would just ask as you call as soon as possible, right? So that you can schedule the time that that you need assistance.
And what does that look like? What does as soon as possible look like? Are we looking like 12 hours, 8 hours, 48 hours?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, when elevators go out, you don't know in advance, right? So if the elevator it goes out in the next hour, but you plan on going somewhere at 10 p.m., right? You need to call as soon as you know that it's happening. But if your elevator go out and you know that you're not going to be going out until 8 a.m. the next day, then I would say call, as soon as you know again, which is not the 24 hours that we're, recommending, but it's as soon as possible.
Okay, but there is no goal in getting to emergency elevator circumstances.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the full question. I'm sorry.
So there is no time frame goal in getting to emergency breakdowns of elevators, right? So an elevator breakdown, all right, so for those emergencies, we're going to have a goal of 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours to get to them. Whereas we're planned, you're saying 24 hours because we're presuming that you're in a planned circumstance, you're going to give the residents at least 48, 72 hours ahead of time. But in an emergency situation, right, where now there's no elevator and maybe you got 30 floors. And so what would be the goal to get to the emergency situations, to get people downstairs?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a like a goal, emergency goal, but I can definitely ask ESD and get back to the CAC with that information.
Okay, and so, but that wouldn't only be for ESD, that's just after hours. During regular hours, it would be somebody.
Property management.
Right.
Yes.
And
So it's 4:30, right, until the next morning, 8 or 8:30 in the morning when management opens back up. So ESD is in charge all of that time.
I think Ms. Manu said 7. It's 4:30 or 7.
It's when property management closes.
So I think that's to schedule. So Monday through Friday to schedule, they should call between 8:30 and 4:30. But the stair climber service would be available 7 days a week from 8:30 to 7.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for
sorry.
those good questions, Mr. Martinez. Tamika, do you have a quick question?
Yes, thank you. Manoush, who developed the stair climber training? And who trains at the development? And is there a list of trainees? And is there a schedule of training? And what happens at a development if no one volunteers?
To answer all the training questions, I'd have to look into that. I don't have specific details on the training, but I can reach out to you after online. As far as developments that don't have volunteers, Mr. Williams, I don't know, do you?
Yes. So they canvas staff in nearby developments, and then of course the greater borough. So once a person becomes a volunteer to do that, they have a running list. So again, if I'm just using Marcinger, right, as a in the Bronx as an example, if no one volunteers at that location, then they will reach out to nearby developments and just say, Melrose houses is near, St. Mary's, more houses, the nearby. And then if you can't get it there, of course, you have the greater borough. So that's why it's important with the 24 hours, because then they'll have enough time to make sure that, anything can happen. Even if you have volunteers, the night before, the person might get sick or, get injured or whatever, then you have a list of people that they can go to.
Helpful. Mr. Gross.
I just want to throw in about the topic from replacing elevator during the red and PAC conversion. I think it should be the best interest for the residents. All replacement elevators should get done after the tire renovation is over. Because if you have one elevator down and the other elevator, the other staff bring up kitchens, bathrooms, tiles, floors, and piping for heating, it's like traffic is traffic from the construction, and then you have one elevator off, and a lot of times from overweight, a lot of times you have so many construction people that overweighting the elevators, and the elevators what is working is getting down. So I think the policy should be when we finish all all the floors, all the apartments, the last thing should be the elevators. And I was having in mind development, even the new elevator was going down because the overweight. So it's a lot of issues we're gonna avoid if we're doing the elevators, the last item from the development.
It's a good point from your perspective. Thank you for that. And I think that the volume of questions also speaks to the fact that this is an important topic for residents, and particularly with the modernization efforts going underway, which is a good thing, but making sure that the elevators are working, and that if people need alternate access stability, that's provided in a timely manner. So we will ask you to please plan on adding this topic and some updates the next time we meet, please. Okay, so with that,
sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
I can add one more thing, just because Mr. Williams reminded me earlier. So it's not just the stair climbers, it's also the resident-owned wheelchairs, resident-owned walkers. So if they need assistance with those devices, same protocol applies. Thank you.
and it sounds like that's all included in this comprehensive information that's going out to the residents in advance.
That's correct.
Great. I had a question related to that, though. It sounds like there were a lot of, Mr. Williams, you described the outreach efforts being like 8 times at this point, or soon to be 8 times. And I'm wondering what other information is provided, and is there kind of a coordinated approach for information sharing during these outreach moments?
Yeah, so again, we try to saturate the information to residents. We do put information on their doorknobs about what's coming up, what phone numbers to contact. We email residents, we do robocalls, we go to resident association meetings, if asked special meetings by the tenant association. We I believe monthly meetings with the association and management at the same time. I know there's a few months beforehand so that everybody's aware what's going to be coming up. So, we're open to any type of engagement with residents. Our goal is to make sure that each resident knows what's going to be coming, and how we can be helpful during this process. I mean, we know any kind of modernization or upgrades, it's not the easiest, but we know it needs to be done. And, we want to make sure that we have all the information to assist them at the best as possible. So again, with this door knocking, it's just not being done during the daytime, right? Doing door knocking during the evening because people work, right? If people ask us to do other times that, normally we don't, we'll, try our best to accommodate, right? It's really about getting out there, making sure residents have the information in the language that they've spoken, because, for me, translation is a big deal. And Samantha can tell you, I really be on our staff about translation, and making sure that people understand, not, just sending things out in English.
Thank you for that. That's important. Excellent. Marnice, I'm sorry we keep interrupting you, but did you have any more updates at this time?
That was it. Thank you. Thank you to everybody for their questions, and I'll follow up on them as well.
Thank you so much. Okay, next, Leroy, do you have any updates for our group?
It sounds like I got updates on everything, right? No. I did want to add for heating that Samantha worked with the heating department to have overviews for each of the district councils. And I see 3 here to talk about their specific areas, to talk about what kind of work that was done in their areas to try to make sure that they have heat. Also, they and they should have extended themselves to come to their DCOP meetings. I know they're scheduled for at least 2 or 3 up to this point that I know about, so they can talk to the greater resident association body about their specific problems or needs. Just want to make sure I earmark that because I know heating season is always a crazy season in NYCHA. So I wanted to make sure I earmark that.
1 second, I think Ms. Lozano has a question for you.
Ms. Lozano?
Well, I wanted to pour you the accolades because I did a couple of years back, I did have an elevator contractor here, and they did provide training to the staff. And it is true, I just want to validate what Leroy has elaborated on, that we did, when we didn't have volunteers to do the stair climber, they went with their diligence, we worked with the borough to get us people. The other thing, what my manager did during that time was that we made an assessment of those residents who had dialysis appointments 3 days a week. So it made it a little easier for those who had, you know, doctor's appointments and dialysis, because that is crucial. So they did work. It all depends on the resident leadership, and it depends on them collaborating in a partnership with everybody front and center. In my district, I already am working on an appointment with the heating. So they're working, they're very cooperative. I want to put it out there. They are, if you reach out to them. The only mishap is that, you know, constantly people are saying that the information is not being sent via email or anything like that, and that is not true. It takes the initiative of the resident to respectfully come to the district meetings in order to follow suit with what they're gonna provide. I had it with capital projects, even though I would have wanted it to be a success, and I'm doing it next month for the heating. So then all the resident leaders will be able to be astute to know what's going on and what we can do as a unit to make sure that everyone gets decent, effective heating in their respective developments. But once again, I have to say that Mr. Williams always does his diligence, and, you know, he makes himself accessible. Even now, it's already going on 7 and he's still on work in progress. So I just wanted to put it out there.
Thank you for that. And
Thank you, Ms. Lozano.
Mr. Williams, thank you for your diligence. We appreciate you.
No problem. I know that also you asked about elections for resident associations. I wanted to point out that there's 210 public housing resident associations. There's 39 PACT Section 8 resident associations. And currently we are doing 13 elections that will be expiring by the end of the year. We're also concentrating on developments in this later fall on developments that have no representation, because it's much harder with those developments because they're like smaller developments, 1 building developments. But we're trying our best to, you know, again, saturate communication with residents and door knocking and doing whatever we have to do to try to get representation in all of those unrepresented developments. But we'll continue to do it as long as we have to until we get someone. We did have success in getting a resident association at College Point in Queens, which took a very long time, as Ms. Tamika Williams-Moore know. It's a very, very small development, you know, and, you know, it happened to, and Chief Secreto and his staff and really helped us garner, you know, the residents to really be effective and say, this is important, right? Yes, it's a smaller development, but you're just as important as a larger development, right? So we do have a resident association there, and that's just one of the developments that we were able to capture in this last spring and summer. Again, we're going to continue to do it as much as possible. Because at the end of the day, we want the voice of all residents to be at forefront. So we're going to try it the most as possible. I know Ms. Lozano brought up information sharing. I do want to make sure that Samantha Rogers, that's been on this thing for very, very long. She's in charge of our weekly newsletter. All associations receive this. Leaders receive this information weekly, and sometimes I make her do it 2 or 3 times a week with extra things. But at least every Monday we send out a newsletter that lays out all different types of things, job trainings, job openings. I know we just put something. It's a community coordinator position that's available in NYCHA now and our health initiatives department that's being funded through the community fund now. Yeah, community public fund. I'm getting it all mixed up, but it used to be the fund for public housing. So we put that information on it. So all information that we get, and we try to share with all the associations. We try to make sure that they are kept abreast of things like the modernization of elevators or anything that we're doing in NYCHA. And also the neighborhood service coordinators, if we made aware, we'll make sure we have make phone calls to the associations to make sure that they're aware of what's going on. I know tomorrow we're having a fire symposium for the first time to really talk about fire safety. And if NYCHA, there's a lot of fires in NYCHA, unfortunately. So we're really making sure that resident leaders understand protocol when it comes to fire safety. We plan on doing this a couple of times a year going forward. We just want to make sure that everybody has that information, and of course share it with the broader residents as they get that information. So I'm hoping to see Ms. Tamika Williams more tomorrow, Ms. Lozano and Mr. Martinez at minimums to make sure that they're represented well.
I just want to highlight, I'm really excited to hear about this fire symposium that you're having for resident leaders. That's tremendous and such important information to get out. I want to ask you to pause for a second just because I see a couple of hands up.
Okay.
Miss Edna Wells Handy.
This is a good report, Leroy. Thank you.
You're
Let
welcome.
me ask you, how many developments are without association?
I will have to get that number. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I have it, of course, and I can email you.
Right,
But
and
it's a handful in each borough. It's not an overwhelming amount, but we want to, again,
right. No, it's good
give
that
you
you
correct information.
Excuse me. Can you let us know the numbers of residents, therefore, that are not represented, and those developments that aren't represented?
Yep, we have that information, so we'll make sure we send it tomorrow.
Thank you.
Mr. Gross.
About fire safety, I would like to add, what is the policy right now with NYCHA about the e-bikes? What we see every single day, explosions, the barriers explode. We have people killed in NYCHA. We see it all over the news every day. So is anything right now with NYCHA, any new policy or about the e-bikes?
So I know, I know the police department can definitely weigh on it, but I can say it's not welcoming people apartments. You should not be, especially when you want to have the batteries. It should not be in the apartments. But our deputy chief of staff is working on the full NYCHA policy. I don't have details as of yet, but we can definitely share, figure out when that's coming down the pipeline. But I'll let
And then
the police department.
Captain Urena,
Yes.
if you could weigh in, please.
They're not allowed at all in NYCHA property. So what you could do, I know in my precinct, what we do operations in different development, and we do interiors, and any bike in the building, unattended, we take it. Any bike change anywhere in NYCHA property, we take them to. So if you do see anything like that, you could dial 911, let them know, and they'll be removed. We have made arrests and a few of them too, because as you know, they steal them a lot. So people report them, we get the VIN number, and then when we go to take one, somebody try to take ownership of them, it's stolen. So now, you know, we kind of get an idea who's stealing these bikes. And with that, that's one of the trend that's going up in NYCHA, which is a lot of GLAs are going up where they're stealing of cars and stealing of e-bikes again, because one with a car, they're leaving them with a key in there, unattended, go upstairs real quick, they think they're gonna come back down right away, they leave the key in and somebody just jump in and take off in the car. And with the e-bikes too, a lot of delivery guys, and even residents, they'll leave it in the front, go upstairs, come back down, somebody already take it. A lot of them are easy, you just gotta go inside, just connect, unplug the wire and just tap them together and they turn on right away. So a lot of these perps know that. So that's one of the issues we have. And I just want to touch quick because I gotta go to, I have to go at the meeting. I have some ways to go. I have a job. Homeless. Homeless is a big issue in NYCHA. Again, in our precinct, we do operation in every platoon where we select like 10 buildings, sometimes 15, and we go and check the for homeless. The desk officer has all the cameras, so most of the NYCHA, and we check the rooftop. So if we see somebody in the rooftop, they notify a unit, they go in there and they arrest the person. With that, as you know, our hands are tied with people in the building where we could, you know, we could tell them to leave if they don't belong in the building, but we cannot actually just arrest them unless, you know, they're refusing, they don't know anybody. But if they're in the rooftop, again, they don't live there, they don't know nobody in the building, we can make the arrest, okay? A lot of people, sometimes they are with visitors, so we issue summons or we kick them out and stuff like that. But that's like homeless and GLA is a big thing right now that's going on in NYCHA. But
Captain Urena, just because our time schedule is getting a little bit thrown off and I'm sensitive to the fact that you have a hard stop. Did you want to give any other quick updates and then we'll get back to Mr. Williams?
that'd be it, unless you guys want to know like kind of a crime. We are up in crime for the 28-day period, which that period covers September 18 to October 15. So we are up in crime. Again, GLA, we're up like 61%. Compare in this period to last year, we are 42 versus 26. And then assault, again, felony assault, we are up 11%. 205 versus 184 in this period that I covered. And then robberies too, we are down 15%, which is 56 just in that period I mentioned versus 66 last year. And then shootings, we are kind of even 13 versus 13. And besides that, I mentioned already the kind of the stuff that we're going up, which is the homeless and GLA, we are picking up a lot compared to last year. Besides that, unless you guys have any questions for me.
Can you say a little bit more about what you're doing with related to the homeless problem?
Yeah, so with the homeless, I know in my precinct, one of the things we do is we do homeless encampment, which we'll send a unit. The unit go to a specific location and they'll do interiors. So they'll go check the roof, the bottom, everything from top to bottom and check, make sure there's nobody that belongs in the building, especially in the roof landing. A lot of the homeless people go to the roof landing and they like to sleep there. We do have cameras to a lot of the roof, not every roof in NYCHA. So one of the things I do myself is when I come in, I open every development I have and I have the cameras for the roof. The desk officer does the same thing. So periodically I check cameras as I'm doing something. I just look at the cameras for every development and I make sure there's nobody hanging on the roof. Now, if I do observe somebody in the roof, I will go over the radio or I'll call you over the phone and have them go into the roof. And most of the time we do make the arrest for that person, that homeless person is sleeping on the roof. We have the NCOs in development, they are out in development and they are doing interiors too. So we do make a lot of interiors throughout PSA 5. I cannot tell you how every development, every precinct works, but we have a condition teams that are doing interiors. We do have the NCOs that are doing interiors in these development. And then we have outside units. So for us, the 2-3 covers if you're at development with their new guys, they call the FTUs, and they do a lot of interiors. So they help us out with that. So that's kind of it. So we do touch a lot of the development and check a lot of development. So All right.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that update. I see a couple of questions are up and I just want to see if those are questions for Captain Urena before he leaves, or if those were back for Mr. Williams. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Captain.
Okay, thank you. Sorry if I gotta leave.
Oh, we appreciate you coming. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, back to Mr. Williams. Mr. Hall, did you have a question?
Yes, I guess the time is now. I don't know if this is slated for Mr. Williams or Mr. Banajad. That being said, we have rules. We have rules when you hire a resident to work for NYCHA, they are given the 964 regulations, so they say, all right, they are taught this. This is supposed to be our Bible. We now have people, for whatever reason, you can blame it on mental health or what have you. But in any event, we have folks who are violating these rules. Now, that being said, if a rule is a rule, why is this rules not being enforced by NYCHA? Now, let me give you an example, all right? We have this yearly lease. When an individual becomes a nuisance to their neighbors, and when I say a nuisance, they walk around, they threaten. In my development, there are nine apartments on a floor. If there's an individual who is walking around harassing 7 of the 9 individuals, okay, and she has a history of tormenting vendors as they come to the floor, things of that nature, the manager sends the folder down to the law department. What happens then? Because, and the reason I'm asking is because I'm sitting here waiting on results from the law department regarding circumstances of that nature. All right. And we're at that point. Now, I do understand, and Ms. Rogers did mention mental health, and you have a unit. I would have joined the unit myself if I would have had the time. That being said, how certified are these individuals from the mental health standpoint of view? Or are they put together just to handle mental health circumstances throughout NYCHA?
That's a good question. I think Ms. Rogers is going to get to that when she gives an update. That's included in her presentation. So maybe we could table that for a minute.
Yeah, she'll handle that part. I mean, I'm not the expert in the process. You know, the first thing I would say, any resident that's being harassed needs to call the police, right? NYCHA is not a police organization. I would say call 911, you know, put in a report. But once a person's folder goes downtown, right, it's not as easy as people think to just remove either someone that thinks it's a nuisance or, you know, someone is breaking rules. You know, it's not a 1, 2, 3 thing. It's an actual process that has to happen. And even after, you know, the process is done, we never want to evict anyone, right? We never want to see anyone in the street. We all know that, again, we please, you know, the police department has spoke about the amount of homelessness in not only just around public housing in New York City overall, right? So again, it's a process. It's not up to NYCHA to just say yes or no that you have to go. There's judges that people have to see, and you know, people are reluctant to say, okay, because they're, and I'm just making something up, not that I know your particular, there's a noise nuisance, right? People are going, you know, I know that's a big thing in NYCHA, and that's why it's selected and stuff, right? Are we going to put someone in the street because of noise, or are we just going to allow them to stay there and try to get, maybe they have mental health or, you know, behavioral issues that we can try to have an outside organization assist them with. So unfortunately, nothing is passed when it comes to government. And our job is to try to find help for those individuals. So if you feel that, this individual needs greater assistance beyond that, please contact your neighborhood service coordinator. They'll have a conversation with the borough office, and we can try to see what kind of assistance the city has, because again, NYCHA is not a social services organization, but we do have a lot of partnerships, and we want to make sure our residents get the help that they needed.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an important question. We're gonna circle back to that when we get to
Samantha will talk on this,
presentation.
yes, on that part.
Leroy, did you have any more updates from your section?
Well, I
today?
just wanted to make sure, and I'm not sure if this was spoke about, but the caretaker hours. I wanted to make sure that everyone's aware that on the weekends, the caretaker hours were cut to, was it 1 or 1:30, I believe, instead of the 4:30 range. I want to make sure that people and residents, not only RA leaders, but residents, if they have issues and concerns about that, for whatever reason, that they're reporting that to the management office, right? If we don't know something, then we can't, do anything about that. So make sure that they're speaking to their manager or their super, because depending on who's there at the particular development, we want to make sure. I know this is something that used to be. When I find in NYCHA, a lot of the things we used to do is kind of the new way that we're going to do ways. So it's really important that if there's an issue with that, resident association leaders, residents, whoever it is, speak to the person in charge at management, and then their job is to speak to their higher ups to say, well, maybe we should adjust it or not, or whatever it is that's needed. But I just wanted to make sure I stated that.
Thank you for touching on that. And I think, Marnoush, did you want to weigh in on that issue as well?
I think Mr. Williams covered it, but just that it was a primarily budgetary decision, and I don't think operations anticipates any issues with waste collection, with pests, but they are regularly monitoring that and will make adjustments as to schedules as needed on a site-by-site basis. But as Mr. Williams pointed out, it would have to be raised in order for those rearrangements to be scheduled.
Great, thank you. Mr. Martinez, did you have a question for Mr. Williams?
Yes, quick question. One, thank you, Ms. Manoush, for answering the why, right, with the budgetary. But now in that consideration for budgetary, well, explain, could you, and it'd probably be long, but could you summarize it quickly? What was the restraint budgetary when it comes to the local developments that reached this? All right, so let me ask it better. I just heard it. Why? What's the budget strain that now impose this hourly cap?
I wouldn't frame it as a constraint, but the caretaker work was being performed by 1:30 on Saturdays. And so it appeared that there'd be room to save money if the hours would be cut back, because the bulk of that work was being performed by around that hour.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Lozano, did you have
yes, I have to speak to Leroy. Leroy, could you call me offline tomorrow? And Edna, if I can speak with you offline tomorrow, Friday, it doesn't matter, because I don't want to, lengthen the time restraints that we have. But there is one recommendation. I think the captain, I have an oversight of his name, the captain that just spoke.
You're right.
From PSA 5.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Well, he seems to be very diligent, and I seem to sound like a broken record that having PSAs, they were more effective. I think that we should consider having a meeting strictly about public safety and get the commanding officers from the borough command to have a meeting with us because there are concerns. That precinct is working diligence about the homelessness, about the undesirables. We have people living in apartments that shouldn't be living in them. And some resident leaders, including myself, have to resort calling safety and security to get the person out of the apartment. So I think this is something that we need to just put on the table and orchestrate a safety and security meeting with the powers that be. It's
That's
just
a
a recommendation.
Chief Secreto, did you want to weigh in on that recommendation? It's a good one.
Okay, I think what Lily's asking is for the PSAs to take back over the patrol responsibilities for NYCHA. Is that what you're saying?
Well, not only that, when I have a senior who was in a tub in my development for 3 days because no one was available to do a wellness check, and she's in ICU right now, just for a routine wellness check, I have major concerns. Because, you know, to know that luckily they found her just breathing, but she's not responding is very disconcerting to me. And my seniors were very upset over it. I'm very upset over it. And the excuse that I get from the local precinct is that, oh, well, Ms. Lozano, we're gonna have to wait until the next graduating class comes in because we have no officers. And we only have one officer for 4 developments. And I sound like a broken record. If it had not been for you, Secreto, I would have not been able to get things done because it was under your watch. And I have to give you kudos to that. But I don't think that it's fair that I have to continue to call you for something that a precinct is supposed to do for my residents. You know, so I think that we need to start letting them know what the procedures are, because telling me and telling my residents, I even went to the city council and I went to my assemblyman. I said, we have to have, if they can't do it, let's pull a partnership and get an advocacy group that when required to do a wellness check, because right now my senior is fighting for her life and she's in ICU right now.
Well, look, that's a priority call. I don't know how that could go,
Well,
unchecked for 3 days.
3 days.
Is your
I mean,
development?
we could talk about it off. Yeah, it was in my development. We could talk about it offline, but I'm still trying to find out through the relative when exactly she made that call, because they never showed up. It was the
my
running water.
question, Lilith, you're covered by a precinct and not a PSA?
Unfortunately.
What's that? The 49th, is it?
Yes.
All right, somebody dropped the ball though, because if you call 911 and you say, someone that's, they're gonna do a wellness check. I haven't heard from them in 3 days. That's very rare.
The water, Secreto, the water was still running. She has burns from her stomach down to her legs. Okay. She's 80 something years old, very capable. Almost came to the
This is
scene.
terrible, Ms. Lozano. This is gonna have to probably direct attention, so we'll take it offline. We'll have someone call you tomorrow to follow
Not a
up.
problem.
Wow,
Thank you.
sorry, Lily. Sorry about
It's
that.
okay.
Wow.
Coordinate with
Yeah.
Chief Guido and Leroy and you, Ms. Lozano.
Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing it to our attention, Ms. Lozano. Ms. Williams-Moore?
Yes, I had a question about the schedule change. I wanted to know, was a cleanliness survey performed after 1:30 to assess the impact to the developments with the schedule change? Because I believe I heard that the assessment was done as a result of or done in response to budgetary cuts, but that doesn't speak to the cleanliness of the development. So I'm not.
That's a good question. Does anyone know if that was performed? And if you can ask and get back to us, but this is an issue we're gonna wanna follow up on.
Yeah, we will have to speak to Eva and her team and get an answer for you.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's a very good question. Okay. We will now transition to Ms. Rogers for an update, please.
Sure. Good evening, everyone.
Samantha, before you get started, I have to leave, but I want to make sure I say good night to everybody. Also, so again, Samantha's going to be tackling mental health, but I just received information that we're going to have a mental health first aid training, which is a 2-day training on November 1st, I believe. It's November 13th.
2 sessions. Yeah, there's gonna be a
Okay,
communication that's gonna go out to everyone. Yep.
Okay, so she'll talk about it. I just want to make sure that I know we were speaking about mental health, so it'll be a mental health training for everyone. I hope everyone has a good evening. You're in good hands with Samantha, and if you need me, mostly everyone knows how to get in contact with me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leroy.
Bye-bye.
So good evening, everyone. So I am going to address our mental health task force first. So just want to let you know that the mental health task force is in its infancy. It is being designed. So there will be four monthly sessions of residents along with city agency partners and NYCHA with CBOs. And I'm loving seeing Ms. Williams Moore shaking her head because she sits on the mental health task force as well. So we do have 2 residents per borough weighing in on how to design what mental health will look like, how to address mental health across NYCHA. And so, meetings have started to take place. And once the 4 monthly sessions have ended in December, we hope to consolidate all of the data and feedback and everything from all of these entities, and then produce a suggested way to address mental health across NYCHA. So there is a mission statement that has been developed. So it is kind of moving full speed ahead. But I know, Mr. Hall, you wanted to know kind of who and what and where and how. We haven't gotten to that stage yet. We will get there, but this is in its infancy. We are excited about it because this has been a long time coming. I can't say that I've ever sat in any resident-facing meeting and mental health did not come up. Right? Even in this meeting tonight, mental health came up. It always does. It is an issue that NYCHA needs to come up with a plan. And so our biggest partner in this is Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Does that mean that NYPD is not going to be brought in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? But we can't do it without resident feedback, moving forward. So that's on mental health task force. Hopefully in our next CAC, we'll have a better update we can share.
I'm sorry, can you say a little bit more about the constituency of that group? Are there mental health experts?
Yes.
On that task force? Okay.
Yes, there are mental health experts from Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, different hospital partners, health plan partners, social workers, psychotherapists, you name it. Yeah, and this is all volunteer. These are all volunteer to lend help. And then once it's written into a plan, and then we'll have, but it's mostly going to be combined with the help of those agencies, mostly community-based organizations and clinics that provide these services as a free resource to residents. We don't want this to come at a cost ever. And so our goal is free resource and then also education. And so the first part of that education is Leroy, as he mentioned, there will be 2 sessions of mental health first aid training offered to resident leaders. When we say resident leaders, we mean the resident association president and entire boards. So when we say resident leaders, I know sometimes people think that we just mean the resident association president, but we cover the entire board when we say resident leaders. And we're going to offer these trainings that are administered by DOHMH to resident leaders, just as a kind of first level education. And that's as a part of this mental health task force. Mr. Martinez?
Yes, thank you so much, and good evening, Ms. Rogers.
Good evening.
The scope of this mental health is addressing just the residents, or are we also looking at the trespass attendants that we have in our rooms, in our basements, and so forth?
It would be anyone who is on NYCHA property. So, right, like Captain Urena spoke about when homeless are found in the buildings. Chief Secreto had mentioned this before, right? Sometimes we can find that they are residents. Sometimes we can find that they're not a resident, right? If it's a free resource, we're going to put into the plan that this free resource be offered to anyone who is encountered on NYCHA property, right? It could be a visitor to, their cousin who is a resident of that unit, but the cousin is visiting, right? The cousin should, be offered the same resources.
Now, I just have one concern though, and this is a concern that I have also with the non-criminalization of trespasses in our basements, in our rooftops under the premise of homelessness. Is it concerns me that we make our basements in all of these restricted areas a point of contact for resources, where now people come and hang out with more incentive in order for them to receive some kind of benefit. I hope that we can take that into consideration when we develop any future plans, when addressing the very serious issue and priority of mental health. But we also need to maintain our community health, right? And we raise our children and we have a very age diverse population, and this is all happening and unfolding in front of them. So just, also take that into consideration as well. But thank you. That's such a great.
Absolutely. So the suggestion right now is to not offer services in any basements or anything like that. If it's at the community center level, if there is a community-based organization that is operating mental health services out of a formerly NYCHA run, right, community center, and that's a partnership, it would be done during the hours of operation and not after hours or anything like that, where, we want people, going into these spaces, when the space is not open. But the suggestion right now is for that is not the suggestion right now, right? It's to work with community-based organizations. And then most of our community centers, our on-site, right, community centers don't necessarily offer that resource. So, and those that do, there will be, parameters put in place.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. All right.
But related to that, is there coordination, Chief Secreto, with what your team is doing with regard to the outreach efforts as related to the transient population?
That was interesting what Captain Urena articulated, that they do an operation every day. The only difference is I don't know how much services that they're being offered, the people that they encounter. So, we still do our homeless operation. What's today? Wednesday? Today's Tuesday. Today we're doing one at 6 o'clock. I'm not sure what development. And then tomorrow we convene at 9 o'clock at another development. As a matter of fact, I think tonight is in Brooklyn. Might be, I'm not sure. It's in PSA 2 tonight. But we do it with homeless services, PD, and NYCHA. And when we encounter someone, we offer them services, be it mental health or drug treatment. And then if they decline, we also offer them shelter as well. And if they decline, then they're escorted out. I think when the police do it just by themselves, it's pretty much, just escorting people out, which, there's a need for that as well. There was something else I wanted to bring up. I'm glad to hear that they're doing something, because it is a big problem, in the city and NYCHA. And prior to this memorandum of understanding that we put together last year to do these 2 visits that we do every week, homeless services could not enter the NYCHA buildings. So the police department would have to escort the homeless person out, and they would encounter them on the sidewalk. That really wasn't, effective, and it wasn't too good of a way to go. So this memorandum of understanding that we entered with them allows them to come inside, and sometimes they'll spend 20 minutes, half an hour talking to someone, trying to convince them to accept services or what have you. And in full transparency, most of them do not accept services. and that's about it. The mental health piece, we have a meeting this Thursday with DA, Bronx DA Darcel Clark. And that's one of the things I want to bring up with her that's on the agenda, is we have tenants that, assault our workers. One guy up in Butler Houses, he breaks out the whole apartment windows, he breaks them out, he throws furniture out the windows, and the police arrest him. And as soon as he gets out, he goes to the management office and destroys the management office. So this guy is a problem. I think the property manager has a order of protection against him, but when she's not there, I guess, it doesn't protect other workers. So there's some things that we have to discuss, but it's a big issue with people with mental health. And what do we do? I think this gentleman, I think someone's assigned to him, but they're not there all the time or whatever. It is an issue.
Yeah, and to Mr. Hall's point, the other 8 apartments on their, hallway, et cetera. So thank you for making those connections. Back to you, Ms. Rogers.
All right, so I just have 2 more. We'll save roundtable for the next CAC because there's not a big update there. But there are 2 other resident touch points that I wanted to touch on.
I did have a question on resident roundtable though.
Okay, so go ahead.
You could just say, because I know that there will be the all meeting coming up later in the week, what the topic of focus will be on that, and also what progress resident roundtable is making on the recommendations from last year's resident roundtable.
Sure. So I will. Okay. I was looking at the time. So this Thursday's meeting will be an update from procurement in regard to how vendors are selected, in regards to updates. And that is based on specifically on a recommendation from Roundtable last year, when the recommendation was, please stop giving the bid to the lowest bidder, because sometimes the materials are not the best and an upgrade is made or a repair is made through this contractor who was awarded the job because of the lowest bid, and then the work is subpar. And so they are coming back to talk about that process and how that process is going to be improved upon. So that is the next update in Roundtable, based specifically on a recommendation. Other recommendations are being worked on, and we are compiling a report, a side-by-side report. Hopefully we can have that presented in the next CAC based on recommendations that were made in Roundtable and where we are on the NYCHA side in regard to addressing them, those that have been completed, those that are in the works, and those that are to be determined, whether it's because of budget constraints, et cetera. What is the reason why these are to be determined? So what Roundtable did ask NYCHA for in those recommendations was a yes, no, or right, or a why not, and if a no, why not, kind of. And so that is the next report that we will have. It's taken us a little bit of time to compile that. But this second iteration, the second year of Roundtable, what they all are working on is different feedback, expanded feedback based on those first recommendations, and then some expanded recommendations. And they will be presenting that more or less in January. So our November meeting, our next month meeting, all of the work that they've done in this second iteration will be compiled and presented, and then it will be ready to be presented to the monitors team and NYCHA exec team in the January meeting. We wouldn't do that in December, because of the holidays, et cetera, et cetera. So,
okay. Looking forward to that update. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then the other touch points is you should be aware of the work order reform process. We are getting away from that name and calling it repairs ticket process, because the confusion was just so grand. And along those lines of confusion with the repairs ticket process, we are revisiting the town halls that we did when this new process was introduced. We did town halls to inform and educate residents on the rollout. So the rollout was in Queens first, and then it went to like the Bronx, and then Brooklyn, and then Staten Island, whatever. So we are starting next week, October 24th, also doing another round of those town hall meetings. And the town hall meetings are twofold. One, for education and information, the difference between the skilled trades repair ticket process and a regular, right, maintenance issue. What's the difference, how to note the differences, and what the expectations are. I've asked specifically for this team to outline expectations and timeline, because yes, it's an updated process. Yes, the process is more streamlined, but it does not necessarily mean that it's gonna go faster, right? And so residents are frustrated that the process is still taking a long time. So we're coming back on October 24th. Queens and Staten Island will get an update. On November 1st, it will be for the Bronx, November 15th for Brooklyn, and November 29th for Manhattan. And the outreach for that is every resident association board member will get a phone call from their neighborhood service coordinator to register them. Emails, of course, are going out. Phone calls are being made from operations, and then property management is going to put flyers in the buildings of every development, letting people know that these Zoom town halls are happening. And so we're excited to get that feedback, but also to do a second round of education. So that's another resident touch point that we're working on. And then another one that we're excited about is we are working with Mayor's Deputy Director on the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. We just started this resident touch point. There's a meeting tonight, actually, in Brooklyn within the confines of the 73rd Precinct. We reached out for resident participation in that, and there are some resident leaders from that precinct, from the developments that are within the confines of that precinct, attending that meeting tonight. And then there's one on Thursday night in the Bronx within the confines of the 47th Precinct. And the idea that the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force is launching is a new initiative called Neighborhood Safety Councils. And it's in the same vein. So it's getting resident voice, police voice, CBO voice, everyone put together to address, gun violence in, higher areas of gun violence. So those two precincts launched first because in the confines of those two, we had the highest incidences of gun violence. Mr. Hall.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm sitting here with my vice president and I may have to delegate her because Mr. Williams did call me about the gun violence and they're coming at my precinct, the 47th. And although I'm overwhelmed with a lot of other responsibilities, it will be delegated to my board. We will handle it to the best of our capabilities. All right.
So you get all of the information where it's going to be, time, all of that stuff. You got it?
I got everything. I got it.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Rogers, for those important updates. And these are very important initiatives. So we look forward to hearing an update on how they're coming along at our next meeting. We are at the end of our—
Asha, there was one last thing. I'm sorry. I did want to say, because there are residents on the call, Leroy mentioned the weekly newsletter that goes out. Please read it. Please engage with it. It takes a lot of time to compile. There's lots of information in there. And right now we're at like about a 40% open rate, and we'd like to increase that.
Great. And thank you for all your outreach efforts, including the newsletter. That's an important touch point. I'm glad you ended on that. And so our next meeting will be the Staten Island community meeting, which will be in person in Staten Island next month. And then we will have our next CAC meeting in December. The date might change and we'll talk to you all in advance to see if you prefer in person or virtual. This time we kind of had a 50-50 split, and thank you all for your flexibility in joining us virtually this evening. But we would like to see you all in person when schedules align for that as well. So please join us in Staten Island if you can. We will be in touch via email with more information about both meetings. And we thank everyone for their participation tonight. We will table our update from Noel. Thank you so much for being on from Brownsville. And we look forward to hearing your update. We'll put you at the top of the agenda next time. And thank you also for Chief Secreto for being on. We will save the more fulsome update of the Safety and Security subcommittee for our next meeting as well. But we'll continue to meet on those important initiatives in the interim. So thank you, everyone. Please be safe and please keep in touch with us, and we'll see you again soon.
All right, everyone. Good
Thank
night.
you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
everyone.
Good night.